Here's a little more behind the scenes that expands the last podcast where we talked about my process for syndicating and creating content for clients. Hey, I'm Justin Hitt with Ad Briefing's Copywriting Tips. In the last episode, we talked a bit about using how data is used, how information is gathered, how the research is libraried, how it all comes together to create outcomes and results for clients. Let's talk right now how you can benefit and track this information. So again, I said you got a library, all the research. What does that mean? What does that mean? Is it just a note in OneNote or Evernote? Is it a bunch of slips of paper that you put in a file cabinet somewhere? Is it just keeping a notebook that ledgers your client activities and has an index where you can go back and reference particular topics or conversations? Well, it could be a little bit of each. But mainly it is taking large chunks of information, breaking it down into summaries or meta information, and then cataloging that meta information into some kind of index. Now, there are many tools to do this, and I have a whole big special report and tutorial about the tools that I use or the tools that you could be using. Back in the day, we used FrameMaker. I actually had a great fortune to work on a couple of technical projects that had about 500,000 pages in documentation. So it was equipment for an aircraft and software for that aircraft. There were a couple million lines of code and lots of documentation. And they had a team of people who maintained the documentation using FrameMaker, and it stored all the documents in a database. You don't necessarily need to do that. You can get a good old-fashioned file cabinet and a simple index to store your past client work. And then that index would contain keywords that would help you cluster that types of client work. So for example, let's say you did a sales letter for a manufacturer selling a widget. Now that was years ago, and that person comes back and they say, look, you worked with Joe, and Joe no longer works here. We're just going through the vendors because we need another sales letter. And we understand you guys did some work for us in the past. Could you write us another sales letter? Now think about how exciting you'd be, and even more excited you'd be knowing that you could simply pull the client's file from several years ago and look through the materials they have, and then get updated and revised materials of their existing position, and then write the next sales letter. In fact, you could even be testing against your own sales letter or another sales letter written. Now, you can also start from scratch by asking the client for materials. But this is a new person, a new decision maker. They may not have access to materials, and that will scope whether you come and collect that material. But altogether, your records in your archive gives you a place to start. If you've got a swipe file, for example, you would group your swipe file by function. For example, all kinds of lead generation pieces would be put together. All kinds of sales letters would be put together. All kinds of categories of sales letters might be put together. That's just one way of organizing this information. A different way to organize it might be by full campaigns. I have a directory on my network drive that has screenshots and PDFs from full marketing campaigns start to finish. Now, I've tagged each individual record here. And by the way, you don't need to do all this yourself. You can have staff that does this for you. But these elements are tagged in order for me to pull all lead generation pieces related to an information product. As you guys know, I have newsletters, consulting services, and coaching as my core business. And you might have copywriting and, website maintenance, and I don't know what you could have a variety of things. Some of the business development people actually do coaching for the presentations that executives make. They write for executives speeches. But altogether, you have to think about which bucket in which you'll put information, and then properly tag those buckets with keywords or context in order to retrieve the information. The best advice anybody ever gave me about storing materials is to make sure you can recover the materials, because very often I've got little niches and nooks around here that have piles of materials that were on a desk at one day, stacked up and then just put somewhere and never actually made it to a file. So start simple and utilize an administrative assistant or some kind of filing system to put those materials away. I found that you can get used file cabinets for a little of nothing. You can get disk space for a little of nothing. What really costs you is the time it takes to recall or to draw back materials. Many of Jay Abraham's speeches, he talks about, hey, if we were at my office, well, I could just get that for you. And Gary Halbert talks about how you almost need to tie Jay in a chair and just, make him give it to you right there. Otherwise, he'll wander off. Well, that will happen. You're going to have these huge libraries of materials, and you'll pull a book off the shelf, and next thing you know, a week later, you still haven't got the project done. So we tie information storage into information retrieval, but information retrieval to a system for developing content and materials. So if you've ever had writer's block, it's basically because you didn't have a system for writing. You either didn't have enough research materials done in advance, you didn't have the frameworks like headlines, offers, calls to action. You didn't have all that stuff built out. You didn't have a proper approach. Like very often in the past, I'd write a sales letter and I'd write a 50-page sales letter and I just still wasn't done with it. But I learned from GKIC, Bill Glazer and Dan Kennedy, that even before writing the sales letter, you may want to write the order form. Because ultimately, that's the purpose of the sales letter. The purpose of the sales letter is to get the order. Ultimately, you're getting the order to get a customer, so you would want to do some customer research to build out your avatar. But ultimately, before you write that sales letter, what are you offering? And then before you write the sales letter, why not all the headlines of the benefits and promises associated to what you're offering, which eventually leads to the order form. And then you can write out your sales letter. Now, if you're going to write a lead generation piece, you write your sales letter first because you can excerpt from the sales letter to create your lead generation piece. Now, if you get into information products or authority marketing or other ways of using words that sell to position yourself, you would write the sales letter for the service that you ultimately want the customer to go with before you write the special report that positions you as the person who's worth hiring for the particular service. Now capture that in your brain. Put your mind around that and understand what we've done here. We aren't writing for the piece. We're writing for the outcome of the piece. So the library is the past deliverables. It's copies of materials. It's reference material, all put somewhere where you can easily retrieve them to assist you to create the materials that are the end result of all other materials that you create. So a customer asks you to write a sales letter. You want to get copies of their past sales letters and their past order forms. If you don't have the order forms that worked well, then you won't know which sales letters worked well, because you can do an A/B split sales letter to the same order form, and then you can tell which sales letter is good. But if the order form sucks, they're both going to have depressed response. So sometimes you might have a very simple, basic order form that just lays out the deliverables and lays out the how to order. You may listen to a number of sales presentations and develop that for your clients, but ultimately it's the sales sheet, it's the order sheet, it's what do we need to know in order to get this customer what they're buying, and then you can build out the sales letter. And I know this is a different approach, but when you really get into the materials from Gary Halbert, Dan Kennedy, all these folks, it's really about that outcome. It's focusing on the outcome. That's what matters. That's what we're measuring. We're not measuring conversion rates on websites. We're measuring customer lifetime value. Now, the conversion rates might get measured to tune the customer lifetime value, but ultimately, these materials have to be readily available. They have to be indexed. They have to be able to be searched. One thing I did find interesting is that you can develop draft materials. A lot of the Gary Halbert letters are testing concepts, and also Dan Kennedy's materials will test concepts in the prospect newsletter. So maybe you have a lot of ideas about campaigns and promotions that your clients could be doing, and you don't want to give them the campaign because they'll go off and possibly hire someone else to do it. But you could tease the campaigns in your prospect newsletter as a means of organizing those ideas while marketing your business. And then your library of prospect newsletters will be the stepping off point for the research materials associated with each issue of the newsletter. And then if you send out the prospect newsletter and you got a bunch of people raise their hand about a particular concept or topic, you can go back to the library of materials associated with the newsletter. You could build out a lead generation piece that expands the original topic and then maybe gets people into a seminar or an event that would then set up the close. So we're going to use the prospect newsletter as a summary of ideas and concepts to then get folks to raise their hand in order to step up to maybe a webinar or an event where you can then make a monetary offer. Now, one thing that's exciting about librarying these materials and then periodically going through these libraries is that you'll start clustering materials around topics. And then when you get a pretty good cluster of materials, you can then go and make an offer to a customer. Now, what also works is if you get a good cluster of customers and you've been documenting their questions, concerns, frustrations, and challenges, you can then start playing matchup. So you can take that customer segment and you can write them a letter about their concerns, frustrations, and challenges, and then make an offer for a consultation. You don't need to create a product for a consultation. You just make an offer for a consultation. If there's good pickup on it, then you can go back into your library and expand on the materials that you have. If you don't already have a library, here's a secret. There's this place called a library in public, a real library where you can go to get answers and research. Your experience with a real library will start developing the concepts that are important to you as far as archival, as far as collecting, as far as organizing information. And again, I have a whole program that we talk about tools. It's a tutorial. I'll walk you through the tools you use. I use some very simple tools, and it's important to use simple tools because you're going to have staff people organizing these materials for you. It can be a lot to organize these materials. But as an organized copywriter, marketer, or business development professional, you're going to start librarying concepts that when a customer says, I've got problem X, you're going to know that A, B, or C will work well for them. And now that narrows the scope for you to create out your statement of work. And then again, narrows the probability, improves the probability of that client's success because you can build from case studies. So actually even make your sales presentations better. Customer says, I got problem X, and you know that problem A, that solution A, B, or C are potential solutions. And tied to that is the story of, the evidence, the story of the customers who have had success with those solutions. Now you can do a quick presentation and say, hey, look, customer, I don't know what solution's right for you, but there are 3 possible approaches that you can take. And let me tell you the story about John, who tried approach A, and here's the results that he got. Now, Sally had a different problem. Here's Sally's problem. She used approach B, and here was her results. And Bob was completely different. Now, again, I don't know which of these solutions that are best for you, but Bob, he approached it this way, and here's the results he get. What I propose is that we do a brief consultation where we'll sit down and look over your business. This is not a sales presentation. It ultimately is digging deep into some of the key issues that you described in the problem that you have so that we can properly approach A, B, or C. Now, it's possible that none of these solutions are right for you because you're a unique business, but we won't know that unless we get a chance to sit down and talk about your situation. Would Monday afternoon be best to do a webinar, or would you prefer Thursday during the day? Do you see how this works, folks? The concept of storing and archiving these materials, librarying, cataloging these materials, builds in the back of your mind a matrix of information. This matrix allows you then to extract from a problem-solution association the right approach for a customer. But instead of giving them the answer and you spend 3 hours talking about possible solutions, you now can differentiate between implementation and benefit. Because if it's not going to benefit the customer, it doesn't matter if they know how to implement it. And so they'll be listening to the benefit and they'll say, okay, well, that's right for me. Now you've set up a gateway where if that's right for you, how do we get started? And then we do the consultation. You might set up a statement of work, whatever your normal sales approach is. But ultimately, it's based in that library, that collection And it helps you be more intelligent in conversations. If a customer says, I'm having problem X, you can ask better questions because you've likely interacted with X before. And if you didn't interact with X, you at least know what kind of meta information you need to categorize X to know where it sets in the body of work that you've done in the past. I know this can be a very complex topic, and I know there's lots of tools available. So if you have any questions about this or any other program we cover here at Ad Briefing's Copywriting Tips, be sure to visit us at www.adbriefings.co.uk. I'm Justin Hitt. I'm here to help you transform business relationships into profits through words that sell, not just using the words, but conveying the words in a way that communicates ideas and concepts so that you're the only logical choice in your marketplace, so that every customer who could do business with you is knocking on your door trying to do business with you. It puts you in a position where you can make better decisions and you can better serve your clients with means like what we're talking about today. A legal firm back in the day when I was a computer consultant, I actually helped them organize so they could pull old cases out, because it turns out legal folks are not writing that stuff from scratch, just like you shouldn't be. Anyway, again, I'm Justin Hitt. Thanks for listening, and stay tuned for our next podcast. You can learn more about what we do and what it does for you at www.adbriefings.co.uk. This has been about librarying your past materials to just simply make your job easier.